Hey there, and welcome to Sheer American. Today we're going to be reviewing this stone wool 100% New York raised yarn. When I found this yarn, I was super excited. I'm always excited when I go into a local shop and find something made in America. The shop owner was awesome and took the time to help me find a yarn that was really going to suit my needs. I did wind up paying $30.25 for this yarn in person, but when I looked online, it actually only really was, the company was charging $27.50. So even though I paid a little extra to buy this, I wasn't too disappointed. I do really like this yarn. This yarn does come in a hank, which means if you don't have a yarn winder, you're gonna need to wind it by hand. And this yarn is Aran weight. They recommend that you hand wash on cool, lay flat to dry, and this yarn is spun in the Hudson Valley. Per hank, you get approximately 165 yards or 150 meters per 113 grams. They recommend using a knitting needle size 9 or 10.5, but we're going to see if that's the route I go. So I'm going to ball this up and then we'll get a crochet hook and see how this yarn works its way up. Okay, so I've taken my yarn and I wound it up. I do have a Swift and a yarn ball winder. Honestly, this was one of the worst yarns I've ever had to wind. Sometimes I've seen yarns like that felt together. This was not the case with this yarn. Instead, this yarn was like looped up on itself and tied incorrectly. So it was very frustrating. The first one had a few snags where I had to take it off, detangle, and wind it from there. The white was by far the worst. It was completely looped on itself, but it wasn't tied like correctly is really what it looked like. It was all woven like in itself. So, I mean, it could have been user error, but I've never had this problem before, and I had it consistently across all 3 of these balls. So that was a little disappointing. That said, the yarn didn't stick to itself. It did untangle, and I at no point had to cut the yarn. So it could have been worse. So this color is my least favorite of the 3, so this is the one I'm going to use to make my swatch, just so I don't use as much of the yarn colors that I more prefer. So I usually like a nice tight stitch. I'm thinking of using this yarn to create a beautiful hat, so I'm going to go in with a 4mm crochet hook, and using single crochets, I'm going to try to make a 4" by 4" swatch to see how it looks. Uh-oh, not starting off to a good start. I did get a snag on that first chain. Okay, so using that 4mm crochet hook, it took me 12 stitches across and 16 rows of single crochets to create a 4" by 4" swatch. I like this quality in a yarn, but some people don't. I did get a little bit of straw or hay while I was working it. To me, that's just showing how nice and natural this yarn is, but I know some people would prefer not to have hay in their items. So it is easily picked out, but it was something that occurred. So it probably is periodically throughout the yarn you'll get little bits of straw. I am happy to say that the yarn itself is pretty soft. It's not the softest yarn I've ever felt, but it's also not the scratchiest wool I've ever felt. So it's somewhere in the middle. I could make myself a nice cozy sweater with this and be comfortable, but I know that if you're really sensitive to that itchiness of wool, you might consider this a bit scratchy. Overall, the only thing that I really disliked about this yarn is the fact that it took me so long to wind it up. At this price, I paid $30 for this ball. Granted, I could have asked the shop that I purchased it from to wind it for me, but because I have a Swift, I usually like to do that myself. It took me way longer to wind these up than any other yarns that I have ever used. And although this is amazing, bonus points for the fact that this is a natural yarn, spun really close to me, it's local, it's from the Hudson Valley. At that price, I just expect a little bit higher quality, especially the care taken when dyeing and winding the yarn up and putting it into that hank. I expect it to be correct and not so difficult to get into the yarn. So for those reasons, I can really only give this yarn like a 2 out of 5. I will use it, but I don't think I'm going to purchase it again. But hey, let me know what you think in the comments below.